There are many different radios on the market when it comes to DMR, and people will tell you to stay away from some or go with others. Today, all I'm here to do is to show you the Retevis RT82. It is a dual-band DMR radio with GPS IP67 rating, a 2200 milliamp hour battery life, capability of recording, and much, much more, which we're going to talk about today. We're going to test a couple of things, like its waterproof capability. On this episode of Ham Radio Dude. Retevis RT82 is available on the Retevis website as well as Amazon, and there's two models. There's this one, the GPS model, and then there's a non-GPS model. But I'm here to maybe convince you or coerce you that if you're going to purchase this radio, and I say if, you probably should just purchase the GPS model unless you have some objection to GPS. And I say that because the difference between the non-GPS model and the GPS model is about $2. The non-GPS model is $111.99 or $112. And the GPS model is $114. So $2 difference, you get GPS built in. And it's actually kind of a cool feature. We'll talk about what this can do as far as GPS goes in just a little bit. But also that comes with the radio is a 2200 milliamp hour battery, your male antenna, and you get a charger. You do also get a programming cable because the programming cable on the RT82 is a little bit different than what your standard programming cable would be. It looks like this. And the reason it looks like that is because those contacts are a better system, especially when you have a cover on, as this radio is rated for IP67 and has the potential to be submerged into water for up to 30 minutes at 1 meter in depth. That is also why I do like this antenna that I was just talking about. If you remember the MD2017 by TYT, it had this really stupid antenna system that was a shark fin, and I didn't think it was a great antenna design. But this one is your circular antenna. It looks like it screws in well, and it doesn't look like much water, if any, could get into that little crevice where the antenna meets the base of the radio. That is also why we have this cover here on the side where the programming cable goes, and also why we have this clip portion on the radio. Now we're going to test that IP67 water capability rating here in just a little bit. But now when we want to get the battery in, we basically got to find out right there. And it should just click into place. You know, let me do that again because it was a little bit off camera, but also I said it clicked into place. And basically, you're going to line the battery up on the back of the radio. It's going to get to a point where it's kind of flush on the bottom of the radio, so that meaning the battery is flush with the body of the radio. And then at that point, you could hold the body toward the battery and the battery toward the body. And then there's a little clip on the bottom of the body that clips onto the battery. So again, I just wanted to show that to you in a little bit more detail. So again, everything on this radio seems like it was designed for IP67 rated, and we'll test that later. The overall look and feel, it's kind of a nice radio. One thing I don't like, and I didn't like about the MD2017 either, okay, you do have these arrows that point up, down, left, and right, but they don't do anything. You have to use the trackball, and you know, what are we stuck in, I don't know, Palm Pilot days or something? Insert stupid joke here. And I'm just talking about as the radio sits stock, bone stock, the only way to navigate through the menu systems was with the trackball. Of course, there might be other things we could do to make the navigation a little bit easier, and we'll take a look at that in just a few moments. You might be wondering how many Baofangs big it is. Well, this is a Baofeng UV5R or UV5X, doesn't really matter. And there's quite a size difference, right? And that's how we measure things these days, as I understand, in Baofangs. But then if you take a look at the Aluance HD1, which is like another DMR radio with dual band capabilities, they're actually about the same size. What about weight? New scale, who'd this? Well, I guess that was probably a bad idea to buy the scale that had this in the front. Anyway, it's 11.6 ounces. And what it is 11.6 ounces with the belt clip, the battery, the antenna, basically everything installed where you would carry this radio. Now, you might be curious of how much like a Baofeng weighs. It's around 7.2 ounces. And the Aluance HD1 is somewhere around 13.4, 13.6 ounces. So it is a heavier weight radio. But before I get too far into everything, this isn't a comparison video with the HD1, but I will say that HD1 accessories, Aluance HD1 DMR radio, they do work with the RT82, so you could use something like a speaker mic that works with the Aluance HD1 or vice versa, and you could use it on the other radio, which is kind of cool. But let me set that to the side here real quick, and let's just take a step back. I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's talk about the physical characteristics of this radio. And in order for us to maybe kind of go through the physical characteristics of the radio, let's get the user manual out here too. Now, we'll talk about the user manual in just a few moments, but if we open up to page 1 here, the user manual actually shows that radio and every button that's on the radio. So I'm going to go through it just real quick here. We already talked about the antenna being here. And on the top of the radio, in between the volume knob, which also turns on and off the power of the radio, is an LED indicator. As you can see right there, it was green when I turned the radio on. If somebody was, or if you were receiving a message, you might be seeing more green there. And if you're transmitting, you're going to see a red LED indicator on the top of the radio. Other than the power switch, the antenna, and the LED indicator, we have an orange button here, which should be custom programmable. We'll talk about that. The front of the radio, we have a speaker on the top of the radio, and I can't find any indication of what the power level is on this speaker as far as whether it's a watt or a quarter watt or a half a watt. But let me just kind of look through this again here. Oh, there it is. Audio output power 1 watt at 16 ohms. But anyway, the speaker on this radio is on the top of the front portion of the radio. And then we have our LCD or our LCD screen, which is full color. If we turn it on, you'll see here full color. Now, it probably looks a little faded out, and that's because my contrast is kind of high on this camera right here. Then below that, we have our keypad. Now, we have a P1 and a P2 button, and we'll talk a little bit about those in just a second as well. But then we have a menu and a back button. And in between the menu and back button and in between the P1, P2 button, that's where that trackball is that we talk about. And then below that, we have a keypad. I do find it weird that the keypad on most of these foreign radios, the star and the pound are on the right-hand side. And it might not just be, Chinese radios. I don't really recall at the moment. But I've always felt like the keypad should be kind of like we're used to, where we see the star below 7 and we see the pound below 9 and we see the 0 below 8. But hey, it's just a little bit of getting used to here. So there's the front of the radio. And then on the left side of the radio, we have 4 buttons in total. We have what would be side key 1, side key 2, and side key 3. Side key 1 is on the very top. And then, the push to talk is the next button down. And it's the longest button here, too. So if you're feeling on the side of the radio, it's the longest button. And you can't actually mistake, for example, the side key 1 with the push to talk, because there's this groove here. Side key 1 protrudes out further than the actual push to talk button. So that's kind of nice. Now, one thing you'll notice is this is an orange push to talk button, whereas the MD 2017 was blue, I think. No big deal, right? However, under the push to talk button is side key 2 and side key 3. Now, those are flush with the push to talk button. So there is the potential that maybe you mean to hit the push to talk and you accidentally hit the up button or the side key 2 button. There are people who maybe can't see very well and they might mistake it. And I could see that if they're trying to hit the push to talk, they might mistake that side key 2 for the push to talk. There is a little bit of a hump in between the push to talk and the side key 2, but it's not enough, I don't think, to actually be able to feel the difference unless you're really thinking about it. All right, so we kind of have a physical overview of the radio. Now, of course, we didn't talk about the back, and there's your belt clip. And your belt clip attaches to the battery. Now, I know a lot of people like it when the belt clip attaches to the radio itself, but I didn't make this radio. Sorry. Okay, I turned the exposure down on my camera just a little bit, so maybe we can take a look here at the user manual. Now, let's get it out of the... let's get it into the open, rather, right away. Yes, there are spelling errors in this user manual. There's grammatical errors, like welcome to use our two-way radio in here. I'd love to hear more about your thoughts and opinions in the comments below, Chip. But with all that aside, it's got a lot of details to it. Now we go over all the actual features this radio offers in the front page. We have a table of contents, and it continues to go on with the characteristics of the radio, getting familiar with it. And then we go into a series of pages which talks about how to use certain things in the menus, how to use DMR, how to check messages and all the other stuff. But in the back of the manual, we have our specifications. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm not going to go over all the specifications, but just a few things that actually kind of piqued my interest. You could always pause the video and you could talk about, or you could actually check yourself on some of the specifications you're curious of. And then you get a guarantee with something that shows the model number, serial number. Does anybody actually ever fill this out right here? Now, speaking about warranties, part of the overall user experience is how is the support and how did I feel when I interacted with that company? And this is where I'm sorry, I got to tell you that I was a little disappointed in Retevis's support. I'm going to just summarize it real quick. I mean, I can go into detail, and we did a lot of testing, but basically, I knew that this radio, basically the programming cable that comes with the radio, which is kind of nice, it wasn't detecting right in Windows 11. And it was multiple Windows 11 computers, multiple radios, multiple programming cables, as I had some other people I knew with this radio try out Windows 11. And it just seems like Windows 11 isn't fully supported. I said fully because maybe somebody got it working. And I'd love to hear how. It even got to the point where, I contacted Retevis, and it took a whole week of them insisting that Windows 11 was supported. And I was sending them videos, even showing them, hey, it's not working on multiple computers and everything. That got very tiring. A week. When I finally, and I kind of knew most of the time, I've got to a Windows 10 computer. I plugged it in and it worked just fine. Now, it took a week of them insisting and telling me that it's not an issue with Windows 11 when it was an issue with Windows 11. My point on this is, and I'm not complaining, but my point on this is this company Retevis, they don't make this radio. This is a radio that they've purchased and labeled on their own, meaning the firmware, the software, the driver support, everything is done third party. And when you get to that, support could be pretty lackluster, to be honest with you. With all that said, if you ever need to use Retevis for warranty support, you might be banging your head against a wall. After like 13 minutes, we're going to finally maybe turn on the radio. And it takes a while because there's a lot of good information. Actually, I forgot the owner sticker, so let's do that real quick. Dude, if you ever see this at a Hamfest, you'll know it was mine. Anyway, let's turn it on. It says export radio when you turn on the radio. Now, export radio, not a big deal. That's just a splash screen, and that could be changed in... A lot of this stuff could be changed in the Retevis programming software. But I also want to make a note here. Once the radio actually turns on, you're at this menu here, and you have your A band and your B band, which I have programmed for digital and analog. And again, you got to use this trackball to go between the A band and the B band. And I don't know if you just saw my finger there, but I was rolling up a few times, and it didn't. I just rolled down. It didn't register.
2, 13, 2, 13, 2, 13.
So, the trackball is kind of hit or miss, to be honest with you. And again, that's why I was saying I wish that these up, down, left, right buttons were actually buttons. They're just indicators, because that would make it a lot easier to scroll up and down. I think that's the one thing I really hate about this radio. However, you can also change channels by going left and right.
13, 14, 15.
Okay, so what I should also mention is this code plug was provided by chicagoland-cc.org. And thank you for the use of your code plug, and thank you for uploading a code plug. Now, we're talking about code plugs, and I think we should also talk maybe about zones and channels and how much this radio could hold as it is stock. This radio supports, as it is, 10,000 contacts to be saved into the radio and 3,000 channels, which for me has been plenty. I mean, I don't really need that many, but if I wanted to go more, that would be when I would start to consider using that TY Tools with the MD 2017 software to hack this radio and expand the potential out even further. So, right now it looks like the radio's off, and there is still an indicator on the top here that the radio's receiving. So if I tap on the button there, we'll see that now I can see both the A band and the B band. I want to make a note that if we're on the actual front panel, or we're on the main screen, excuse me, and I hit back, it'll mute the B band or the opposite band that I'm on. So let me unmute that again by hitting back. If I go down here and I slide down, I'm now on the B band, my analog channel. And if I hit the back button again, it mutes the top channel because this is capable of dual receive. You don't want to, maybe sometimes you're like really listening what's going on the B band, and the A band jumps on and it's kind of a pain to hear. Tap on that back button, it'll mute the top. So that's kind of cool. And also, you saw the monitor, the LCD go black while I was talking, and that's because I have, just like that, I have the LCD set to a timeout of maybe 10 seconds or something along those lines. In the software, you could change all that stuff. You could change how long the timeout for the screen is, the brightness or the dimness of the screen as well. Those are all things that are completely modifiable. Now, I do want to make a couple of more notes here before we start testing power and things like that. If I change the band again here, that's muted. Oh, wait, I can't because it's muted. That's right. If I'm on B band and I slide up when the A band is muted, it won't let me. So I'm going to unmute the A band. I'm going to go up to the A band, and then I'm going to mute the B band, and now I can't go down. But this also leads way to, well, I see a D here. That means I'm in digital mode, and if I see an A there, I'm in analog mode. But also this little shield here is, I think, an indicator that I'm in digital mode as well, from what I can gather. Now, I have read through the manual, and I could probably jump online and find the answer here pretty quickly. In fact, give me just a second. Oh, cool. So the shield, it means we're in digital mode, but it also means that if it's blue and red, that you're using an unsecured transmission. So I'm in digital mode with an unsecured transmission. If it goes to blue and yellow, that means that I'm using a secure transmission because this radio actually does support encryption. Now, I'm not here to justify and talk legalities about encryption isn't supported on ham radio because I guess in theory, since it's Part 90 certified, you might be using this for something else. So, Now, you might be asking yourself, well, what else could I do in digital modes besides DMR? And there's actually, well, it is still all digital and DMR, but there's a few other things you could do with this radio. I went on to Simplex just for the simplicity's sake, and I'm going to go to menu. And what I'm going to do now is I could go one of two ways. I can click on contacts or I can click on messages. If I click on messages and I go to inbox, you'll see I don't have anybody who has sent me a message. However, I can click on write a message, and I could write a message here, kind of like the old Nokia days where you have to hit like 3 times for the letter O and so forth. But anyway, once I get a message in, I did it. I want to click confirm with P1, but you hit menu to confirm, and then you can send it, and you can click on contacts, and your contact list, mine displays all the list of my talk groups first, and it's easier for me to go through here and go up and then find somebody to select. So in this situation, I'm just going to select somebody at random, and we'll go with this guy, and then click confirm. Now it's going to try to send. I did it again. Oop. And now the video froze. Hey, sorry about that, everybody. Yeah, you know, the Logitech cameras have really poor shielding, and when you get into close proximity and you transmit RF, it causes, you know, the computer to do crazy things. Maybe some Toroids would help in the future. Maybe that's another episode. I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about other things you could do. You know, you could do text messages. You could send messages to people on DMR. You could talk to them in digital modes. You could use repeaters through talk groups to talk to other people. That's more of a DMR tutorial, but this radio also does a PRS because there's a built-in GPS on this model. And the APRS, I just kind of want to make a note and get it out of the clear here. As far as I could tell, APRS is only capable of being used on DMR, but it still serves a purpose, and it's still kind of cool. So you could, and you do have the capability of GPS. You can enable all of that within the code plug software for the Retevis RT82. And even though I didn't get this radio to program with Windows 11, let's just go ahead and kind of check out the code plug software. Now, yes, you'll see it says it was programmed this date, but it didn't work. I just want to make a couple more notes. Actually, that's the day I installed the software. Now, I do want to make a couple more notes here. You have a A range and the B range, and you could actually set those in here. A couple other things. It shows your model number. It shows the version of the CPS. But if you click on the left-hand side, this is like a basic code plug software. And if you never did code plug softwares before, it's a fairly easy thing to kind of set up. This is nice for me to go through this because then I could show you and explain some other features that this radio has. Like, for example, here in the general setting, if we're going to set our radio name, so maybe I'll call it The Dude, or W9FFF would probably be more professional, which is my call sign. But anyway, if you wanted to, you could actually have other radio IDs on here. So maybe I share this radio with my friends or my wife, or whoever it is. During this, if you set the radio IDs up within the CodePlug software, you could actually go into the menu and you could change that radio ID. So maybe whoever's using it won't have to be like, oh, I'm actually not W9FFF. I'm just using his radio, or my call sign is blah, 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 blah. Thanks for the explanation there, right? Other than that, though, there's a couple other things here that are kind of nice. And you could have up to 4 radio IDs. The one radio ID, which is the primary one, we'll call it. And then you have radio ID 1, 2, and 3. You could set your mic level on here, too. So maybe somebody says that your mic sounds soft or your audio sounds soft. You might jump in here and change your levels as well. And yeah, I'm not going to go into a super lot of the details, but throughout here, there's different things like we could actually define those buttons. Remember I was saying that there was the buttons on the left, 1, 2, and 3, the side buttons, and then there was P1 and P2. Well, you could actually assign all of those. Right here, right now, you'll see all mine are, because this is a standard just plain code plug, they're defaulted off. But you might say, hey, maybe I want to select my power on the top button. So every time you hit that orange button like you see right here, yeah, that's now you're going to change your power levels. And maybe you're like, hey, I want to change side button 1 to be the up. I think there's a channel up. Yeah, right key. Side button 2 to be the left key. Left key. There you go. These are just examples. But now these side buttons would control what this stupid trackball had actually controlled. So it kind of works out. Kind of works out really nice, to be honest with you. And you could basically program those any which way you like. And then you have P1 and P2, which you could also program. I do wish there was somehow you could program menu and back, and I know those are kind of the default menu and back, but I would put them up on program 1 and program 2, or P1 and P2, and then I would probably bring P1 and P2 down here if I could do this within the CodePlug software. But it is nice to be able to change the definitions of the buttons. And you could also specify multiple buttons and presses per radio. So, for example, if I tap on this, and the radio's off right now, but if I tap on this, maybe it changes, in between A band and B band. But if I hold down, maybe it does something like change the power levels, or maybe it does something like, it shows your battery indicator or something along those lines. So each button has the capability of being programmed for a long press, holding down for more than a certain amount of time, and a short press. And you could actually specify that amount of time up here in the long press duration. So that 1,000 milliseconds would be a second, right? I just wanted to kind of show that to you in detail because it was something I was talking about a little bit ago. Now, with text messages, you could actually make predefined text messages as well and add them in here so they're set kind of like you could reference them and send them to anybody. So maybe something like that would be like, hey, good to hear from you again, or are you out there would probably be a good one. I don't know. Privacy setting, that's, again, I'm not your mother, and I'm not going to tell you what to do because you're a grown adult, you're an individual. But privacy setting is where you would set your encryption keys. Now, the rest of this is setting zones and setting channels and scan list. Now, the zones, I don't think I mentioned it before. 250 zones are permitted per this radio, so you could put 250 zones in here. And again, I got to reiterate it again, I haven't talked about TY tools because that might be a whole nother episode. But you could also do your scan list and all your channel information in here as well. So it's programming a code plug. Other than that, there's this VFO mode, and you could do things like set if your VFO mode is going to be in digital or analog and what the bandwidth would be. So in digital, it's only 12.5 hertz, and then in analog, you could do up to 25 hertz, as you can see right there. Hi, I'm Ham Radio Dude, and you might remember me from such episodes as the one I just interrupted. I'm here today to talk to you not about your vehicle's extended car warranty, but about channel supporters. No, I'm not begging you for support. I wanted to thank the channel supporters for everything that they've done and continue to do to help support the channel. So thank you guys, and your name should be listed right here. And without further ado, actually, let's put a commercial break in here right now. So the only other thing that I really wanted to mention real quick is if you click menu and you don't see anything but maybe one option, which would be zones, you're probably in analog mode. Menu analog mode only has one option. If you bring it over to digital mode by changing your zones, you then go to menu, you have all these different options. And the one other thing I wanted to kind of discuss today was utilities. Now, if we go into utilities, there's three different options in utilities. I want to talk about program radio first. Now, you enable this when you're getting ready to program, a channel, for example. So you can go RX frequency, and you could basically set up like your own channel. So if we wanted to set up like NOAA weather radio, maybe we would hit menu here and we would type in something like, see how it's not letting me type in anything at the moment? I have to hit back. There we go. I had to hit menu twice, and then that was interesting, actually. So then to backspace, I just used the trackball, which I love the trackball. And then I could type in like maybe a frequency here or two. And I'm going to type in NOAA weather radio just to get an idea whether or not this thing sounds good or not. So we're going to confirm that. But anyway, you could change the channel name as well. So like maybe we wanted to change this to something else. I'm going to leave it as it is for right now. And, well, I guess I'm not. I'm going to actually go back and just delete it and type in so I don't accidentally get confused. Yeah, that's good for now. We're going to go ahead and click confirm. And basically, you can continue down here and you could add, your CTCSS tones. If it is DMR, you could add your time slots and so forth. So I think you get the point that this program radio allows you to manually put in a frequency. Now, radio info is just going to be, well, what is your number? And so you can click on, well, what numbers do I have? W9FF, this is the number. But also, what's a list of the different radio IDs that you have on here as well? Finally, if we go to radio settings, there's 17 settings in here. I'm not going to go through them all, but I will scroll down for you. Obviously, power is going to let us change from high, medium, and low. High, mid, and low, which is this radio is supposed to have a maximum of 5 watts. We're getting there, I promise you that. The backlight allows you to adjust the backlight settings. Squelch, intro screen. Now you could actually have a photo on here, and that's what I just set it to a moment ago, was to photo. If I had the software set up, I could actually upload a photo with certain requirements, and when I turned on the radio, it would show me that photo. The keypad lock, the LED indicator, Vox, password lock, get it, the record. Now you could actually record conversations that are coming into the radio as well, so that's something that's kind of neat and exciting. And I think that's about it here. So let's get to the fun stuff now. Let's test the power output, the battery rating, all that good stuff. All right, I ran a bunch of tests, the battery rating, the power output, and so forth. So we'll talk about those as I dip this in water. And no, you didn't hear how this radio sounds in this whole overview, but this was more of a feature overview. I will give you just a little bit of a demonstration here.
11.
I mean, honestly, on digital, it sounds really good. And then on analog, I'll play a clip here, but you got to keep in mind my microphone does have a bunch of filters that are enabled, so it's not going to be completely accurate. So with that, let's go ahead and soak this thing in water for 30 minutes, and we'll be back. And now for an audio test.
This is W9FFF testing. W9FFF clear.
During that audio example, you also might have heard buzz, but that buzz is actually coming from the other radio as I was walking around. So, just keep that in mind. Now, here I am. I throw this in water. It does, do a really good job in the water. But let's talk about the test I conducted before I did this. I did use a continual load tester drawing at 1 amp to test the battery, and I had 2100 and roughly 50 milliamp hours on the continual load tester, which means the battery is pretty close to, if not 2200 milliamp hours. I'm quite surprised, and I'm actually really surprised that everything that they've been advertising as far as this radio goes is actually included. Another thing I wanted to make mention about, I said there was 10,000 contacts available in this, But there is some conflicting information online that says there might actually be 100,000 contacts available with this radio stock, depending, I guess, on the firmware. So keep that in mind. I wanted to discuss the power output on this radio as well, and I think this is a good spot to just really briefly touch on it. Now, this radio on both VHF and UHF is rated at less than or equal to 5 watts, and I thought I would maybe get less than or equal to 5 watts. To my surprise, on both VHF and UHF with 2 meters, one being a diamond antenna SWR/power meter, and the other is an RS40, I believe it's pronounced Nicey or Nisi. Both meters showed on high power, both VHF and UHF, about 5.5 to 6 watts of power. If I brought it down to the mid-power range, I was getting exactly 3 watts of power on both meters. And then with the power settings on low, I was getting 1.5 to 1.75 watts of power, roughly. I look at that and I don't discard that maybe the meters are both wrong and all my tests are inaccurate. But I kind of do believe it. And the reason I believe it is these meters have never really failed me in the past. In the future, I should probably get something that will help me test these things a little bit better. And just for the reference at how this was tested, it was tested with short pieces of coax that went into a dummy load, being an MFJ dummy load. And here we are in the last 10 seconds of the 30-minute underwater challenge. And I know it's not exactly or even close to a meter, but I think the point gets across that we've put it in water for 30 minutes. And here we go. Radio is still on. Let's kind of wipe it off here and check a couple things. First, actually, I'm going to turn it off just briefly here. I will tell you that the battery showed dead right there, which was kind of concerning because I put this in and it should have had a full charge. It was on the charger all night. But actually, initial observations is, there's water on it, but it doesn't look too bad. I do think that this antenna here, it has a little lip on it, and I think that really helps keep the moisture out. Let's take a look. Oh yeah, water got in there for sure. See if you can see that. So water is definitely in there. I wouldn't call this IP67 rated, and I mean, because if water's getting in there, there's that potential that it's going to go further down and damage things. So, let's see what else we got, though, before we jump to conclusions, I suppose. Let's take the battery out, and I could already tell you that there's some water right there. Now, that's just on the outside, though. Let's check on the inside. And I was actually really concerned about this lip because it actually feels like it's not fully pressed against the body of the battery's not fully pressed against the body. And I'm right. There's water, moisture all inside here. If you could see some right here. I know it's kind of hard to tell, but there's... What if I could turn the... Let me try to turn the... That might help a little bit. Let's see. There you go. So you could see all the water that did actually get in there. It's not horrible. And in fact, the contact area, the gasket that's where the contacts are for the battery, it did protect the water from getting past that point. Now, there is some moisture and water on the actual gasket, but not any further in. As far as this battery goes, yeah, there's moisture all over the battery. But again, the contact portion of the battery is relatively dry. And we should probably open this up and see how this did. I'll be 1 second here. Yeah, there's moisture in there too, as you could see. The moisture is minimum, don't get me wrong. However, it is concerning. I don't know that it's necessarily any worse than some of the other radios that I've tested in the past, but regardless, it did survive 30 minutes underwater. Now, the true test will be in a few days, and if it doesn't work after a few days, we know that moisture got in and did actually destroy the internals, which I've seen before. So even though it appears to be IP67 rated, we will have to wait for a few days. Let's go ahead and screw everything back in here. turn on the radio, and it might sound a little odd because there might still be some moisture in here. Now, one thing I want to point out, on previous radios that I've tested and I've thrown underwater, one of the contacts is typically, usually the positive, is typically always really corroded. And this one, that's not the case. So that's actually the first radio I've ever seen where the positive contact didn't corrode.
11.
It sounds completely fine, surprisingly. So, hey, radio works. It shows that the battery is full again. And I'm going to leave it overnight. If there are any problems, I'll make a whole new episode just kind of showcasing that the IP67 rated failed after a few days, or the radio died after a few days, or whatever. But otherwise, if you don't hear from me, you know, they say no news is good news. And I'll make sure that we get this really tight when we're done here. So anyway, that's that. You know, this was the IP67 rated RT82 from Retevis. I kind of same radio as the MD 2017. But anyway, you know, we could in the future go further and test this even more. But this was just supposed to be a brief overview, which ended up to be about a 30-minute overview of the radio. I hope it gave you some insight on what this radio has to offer, and maybe it interests you. Until next time, I'm Ham Radio Dude 73.